Hurricane Katrina, which first made landfall on August 23, 2005, was the start of a startling trend of highly powerful hurricanes that has continued over a decade later. While when most of us think of Hurricane Katrina, we all think of one thing in particular, the real damage done was tragic. So much so that the name has been retired from use for future hurricanes. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, Hurricane Katrina was a Category 3 hurricane that made landfall twice in late August of 2005. The affected areas include Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, Georgia, Louisiana, but Louisiana and Mississippi were the most heavily affected of any of these areas. The storm first started out in the Bahamas as a tropical depression, upgrading to a tropical storm as it moved towards Florida. And once it finally made landfall, it had become a Category 1 hurricane. Category 1 hurricanes are the least powerful of any of them on a scale of 1 to 5, with winds above 75 miles per hour. For comparison, a Category 5 has winds over 156 miles per hour. Hurricane Katrina, though, only stayed in Florida for about 8 hours before moving out onto the Gulf. Once it did so, it gained power and gained the strength to do what we all know it for. Now, the reason that hurricanes tend to gain strength in the Gulf of Mexico is due to the fact that they are created out of a friction of cold and hot air meeting each other. The Gulf is full, especially in summer, of warm water and warm, moist air that is absolutely ripe for hurricanes being either created or gaining power. Hurricane Katrina spun all the way up to a Category 5 hurricane in the Gulf, while weakening down to a 4 and then a 3 by the time it made landfall in Mississippi. Now, while Mississippi suffered quite a bit, New Orleans suffered most of the damage, totaling over $125 billion in property damage and a loss of over 1,800 lives. Monetarily, this is actually tied with Hurricane Harvey as the most expensive hurricane in U.S. history. Worse yet is that human error is part of why so many lives were lost in Hurricane Katrina. New Orleans actually sits below sea level, and there are levees in place to keep seawater out. These, however, were in terrible shape when Hurricane Katrina hit, many of them not functioning and their operators actually being afraid to stay in place. One or two did stay in place, and they were okay throughout it, but that lack of confidence in the machinery is a perfect demonstration of quite how bad it was. Over 50 of these stations broke throughout the storm, and that's part of why over 80% of the city became flooded with water. Once the city was flooded, and once the hurricane had gone, water stayed for over 2 weeks. The response effort didn't even come until a few days later, as it was ridiculously hard to navigate in and around the city and surrounding flooded areas. Looting began to be a problem as people just didn't have access to the necessities for life. Some of those who were able to be evacuated, a good 15,000 of them, were moved to the Astrodome in Houston, but it was certainly tight. Eventually, meaning by October, the last of the floodwater was pumped out of the city. Now, over 10 years and billions upon billions of dollars later, 325 miles of new flood control walls, pumps, and other systems have been put in place, as well as an entire new state-run committee for flood control, protection, and evacuation. And while currently there is debate between whether it should be the federal government or Louisiana's government who pays for all of this, the work has already been done. the systems are in place, and we shouldn't have another tragedy in New Orleans like Katrina again.